Okay, well, here we are on the Leader Farming Podcast today with my friend and mentor of many years ago. Wow, it's been quite some time ago was when you sit down and start to think about it. But Andy Christiansen, wow, it's an honor to have you here, and want to take a minute, let you tell about yourself and tell our listeners out there who you are and what you do. And we'll dive into some conversation. Probably going to have a lot of fun because that's what you and I do when we get together and share some good old stories. So I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. And I appreciate the mentor part. I'd say we're co-mentors, but I day job help people figure out how to balance life and work, man. ROI and ROL, not just one, not just the other, but how do you get your together at work and at home? And I don't know, man. I don't know if I got dropped on my head as an infant, but I love that stuff. I just love helping people kind of solve their puzzle, solve the business puzzles, the relationship puzzles. Because, on your deathbed, and no one's going to look back and care about work. Even though I love work, you love work. We just take a lot of time and spend it at work. But on our deathbeds, it's all about family and the people we impacted and the difference that we made. And if that was at work, great. And if it wasn't at work. So I spend a lot of my time talking to people about that. And, that gets into leadership, which is what we're talking about today. And I started out in the beverage world, just a real quick bio, the beverage world, consumer packaged goods, Gallo Winery, and ended up inventing a product called Fruit 2.0. That company we sold to Kraft, did a couple other exits out there, Arisonics, in-ear monitor company, we sold to Fender. I guess I could say to some degree that you and I started a not-for-profit and sold it to a Chick-fil-A operator, I think for $1 or something.
Something like that.
But yep. I think that's in your spare time, as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So not a full-time kind of profession. That's me.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your family a little bit, and then not just what you do, but who you are.
Yeah. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which was a tough place to grow up. And my parents divorced when I was 7. And literally, I was on my own a lot. My dad raised my brother and I. We had 2 miniature lions in the house as well. Some people call them cats. And that was our family. And I literally was on my own a lot. Became, I'm not kidding, a drug dealer when I was about 14. I learned to cut grass and make money. And then I learned you could sell grass and make more money. So I did that for a few years. I haven't done that for probably, 6 months now, but I'm kidding, of course. I got out of that a long time ago. But that builds into who you are. I had a tough upbringing, difficult upbringing, and I had to learn at some point, am I going to keep going down that road, or am I going to find a better road? Because that's a tough road. That could end up in prison. You could end up down and out, living on the streets. And so I looked at some of these other mentors. You mentioned mentor earlier. I found some mentors, and I realized there's better ways to do life. And I've been going down that road since probably 23 years old, when I realized in the middle of college, towards the end of college, there's a better life to live. Faith became a part of that. Leadership became a part of that. Being proactive, being positive, those were all things that I didn't grow up with. And I realized that's who I want to be. So when you say, who are you versus what you do, I want to get to the day, well, I won't be here, but at my funeral, where they'll have to turn people away that want to line up and say good things, not because of what I did, but hopefully because of who I was for them, I would hope. And what I think that is you and I talked about character a little earlier in our conversation, but a man of character, consistency, that I put others before myself. family first, take care of your family and then other people.
Yeah. Well, I think I would be one of those folks lined up to say good things about you at your funeral. But I
Man,
think,
that'd be an honor.
well, and I appreciate you saying earlier this co-mentor thing. In fact, I think you kind of wrote a book about that, which we can talk about here in a minute. This idea, this 40-40 principle. Now I am very much on the other side of that 40, 45. But when you and I first met, this idea of if you're over 40, listen to those that are under 40, and if you're under 40, listen to those that are over 40. And
Yeah.
so I want you to speak into that for a minute. But I do appreciate you saying that about co-mentors, because you were in my life at a very, very crucial time. And I really do think that our listener base out there is predominantly those that are in their mid 20s, young professionals, and that's our audience that we want to speak to, because our journey that we've been on, to some of it together and some of it separately, we've learned a lot of things along the way, and I want to share that wisdom with those out there listening. And I told you prior to this call that I would like to ask you this question as well. What is it that you would say to your 25-year-old self, knowing what you know now? So we got a couple directions I want to go here. Talk a little bit about the 40-40 principle and what that means. Tell us a little bit about your book, and then we'll jump into this idea of it, like a seasonal growth mindset, and how you can apply that to this concept.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell one of my favorite Zach Thomas stories.
Mm-mm.
And you were probably, I'm guessing, when we met, 25, roughly.
Yeah.
So under 40. And that would have put me like over 40, certainly. And we're out there in the middle of a field in Columbus, Georgia, Buck's Farm. We're preparing, leadership team preparing for one of these events. We have a couple hundred guys coming. You would help people use the rappelling tower, all this stuff. We were doing a little team building just with our little core team. I think we were tossing the chicken around, one of those little weird rubber chickens, and we were debriefing. And you shared this story, and you guys have to picture Zach Thomas back then, high and tight, looked like
screaming high and tight.
Yeah, I mean, Army Ranger trainer. What would you call? Were you special ops? What do they refer to you as in the
Well,
Army?
at the time, I was an instructor at the Ranger School down at Fort Benning. So
yeah, Ranger instructor. Yeah, they don't just pick anybody to be Ranger instructors. And so you were really good at what you did. And I don't think anybody want to come across you that wasn't an ally if there was a war on. So you were debriefing about home life. And we were just talking about leadership and what it's like to lead at work and what it's like to lead at home. And someone asked the question, hey, is there a difference? Like, how do you differentiate? And you shared this story about going home one day. You're leading all these men and some women, of course, in the Army, and doing a great job, and things are working well. And then you go home and treat Christy, your wife, the same way. I don't think Lucy was born yet. And she says to you, the way you repeated it, I don't think I can do it justice, but at some point she said, Zach, I know you're a captain in the Army and you're all that, but here, I ain't one of your soldiers.
Yeah.
It's like, that was like your revelation to got to do things a little different at home.
Yeah. She's like, I'm not one of your Ranger students. So yeah.
And so one of the big things I've learned is you can be super successful in one of those environments and almost a complete failure in the other if you don't learn to read the room or your audience. And so that's probably been the biggest lesson in my life is I have to moderate and or flex for different people in different scenarios. And that's where that book came out of, the 40-40 principle, which you already defined the tagline, under 40, over 40. And we need each other. Like, good luck if you're trying to do it all on your own. You need a dream team. You need a personal board of directors and a professional board of directors. Just get people around you, people that can support you, challenge you, and make you better. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot has changed in the last, 15 years, since you and I were working together, or around 15, 17 years ago. What do you think, though, in terms of the 40-40 principle and this idea, for this current generation, and they're looking at us now, looking at me now, like what is it that they need to hear in this principle that would help them make that a part of their life, a part of their
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 words: be intentional.
That's good.
I think we overthink all the time. I do anyway. The challenge is simple. If we're going 40-40, the challenge is simple. And I don't think it's changed since Socrates or Solomon. It's all about find someone that you admire or that you're curious about. See if you can get a few minutes with them. Ask them if you can ask them a few questions. It could be a random meeting in a hallway. It could be a formal coffee, sit down, lunch, dinner, whatever. It could be a phone call. Just be intentional. And I always remember this one guy, do a lot of training with the Air Force and Armed Services on this leadership by design tool, where you can see behind me these 4 colors, and everyone's one of those 4 quadrants. And this one guy, we were coming out of that training, and I challenged him to find a mentor. And he said, "Hey, I got this guy from my past, but I haven't talked to him in like 15 years. And he was actually a Catholic guy, and this was a Catholic priest." And I was like, "Well, cool. Like, call him up, man. That's like his job, all right? He's there to help people." And he's just debating it back and forth and back and forth. And he finally does it. And I check in with him a couple weeks later. His call sign was Bear. I said, "Bear, how did it go?" Long pause. And he's like, "I think I had the best conversation I've had in probably 10 years, bar none." And I'm like, "You got to tell me about it." And he walked me through it, and I was like, "That's a good conversation." The guy affirmed him. He said, "This is what you've always been like. You shouldn't have any fears about what you're trying to get into. No trepidation. Go fast, go forward. You're the man." Probably had a few, checks in there about like, watch out for this, watch out for that. I mean, Zach, that's like, this stuff blows my mind, because it's like AI. It's like artificial intelligence. You and I could sit down and I could say, "Oh man, I've been having a tough couple weeks." And instantly your brain goes into all the memories you have about me, all the things that are good about me, the things that might not be good that could get in my way, bumps, traps, things like that. And you're going to give me a nugget that's almost like artificial intelligence. Like, you got all that data. That's what a mentor can do. And that's what this guy did for Bear. And so there's hundreds of those stories. We just have to take the step and call and ask. So that's what I would tell a millennial, centennial. And I do all the time.
Yeah. That's good. Well, this idea too of reverse mentoring is very different than what other people are saying out there. So speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, and by that you mean a guy like my age being intentional with a guy like 25 years old, saying, "Hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain about TikTok or Podium or something that I may not fully understand, but they're living in it day in and day out." Yeah, I think it's the same. And I'll be transparent and vulnerable with this. I need to do the same thing more. I'll do it more casually, but there's a little bit of fear when I think of approaching a 27-year-old, because I know they're going to think it's a little bit weird. It's not traditional, as you said, but I have to fight that, override that, because when I do that, it's always an awesome conversation. And they're always so honored You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'll riff on this a little bit. I was in a gathering it's probably a year ago, and I was talking about this topic, and I was really pushing on the older dudes. And when I say older, older than me, they're up there. And I said, you've got to have children, grandchildren that are in this season. They need you. And almost to a person, they put their hands up and they say, well, I've tried.
Mm.
Watch my voice inflections in watch my face as well, if you can see it, because this is what they look like. Oh, I've tried, and they don't want to listen.
Yeah.
I went, did I hear that right? So
Mm.
the next guy, I said, well, what else? Let's unpack this. And the next guy, face all curled up, angry. Yeah, I tried it. They didn't want to hear anything I had to say. And after the second, maybe third, I said, can I ask a question? You, as the older dude, were you there to learn and understand, or were you there to teach them the stuff that you think they need to learn from you?
Mm.
It got real quiet, because that's my generation and up, man. We're taught to be the smartest person in the room and come in prepared, get the answers right. And I'm like, man, this is nothing like that. This is showing up, being curious, being interested. Better to be interested than interesting, and learn. And if nothing else, just appreciate what they have to say. Hear their story. Like, hey, man, you're 27. I'd love to hear your story. And shut up and stop teaching. You nailed this a couple of years ago, Zach. I hope I'm not getting off topic with this, but you came up with the whole. Maybe we did. It doesn't matter, but I remember it coming from you. The whole command and control,
Mm-hmm.
old school style versus more ask and listen and learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a breakthrough concept for me. And I still don't think our culture's figured it out.
Yeah.
We're still command and controlling. At least that's what I see.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you think on all that? I know you've got stuff to say on that topic.
Well, I've definitely learned a lot in that area. And I think when we look back over, the last decade or 15 plus 20 plus years, a big difference between the way we grew up looking at older individuals was we did need them for knowledge and information, but the information age has really changed that. And this younger generation, like you said, you had to be the smartest guy in the room. Well, this younger generation does not need us for knowledge or information at all, but what they do need us for is for wisdom and experience. And I think that is the differentiator between, this model, this knowledge based model versus a wisdom based model. And I think,
Hmm.
that's what we can learn, or the listeners out there can learn from our conversation, is that it is not just, you're not just going to a mentor or someone that is older than you or over 40, for knowledge, because you don't need them for that. You got Google, you got this thing right here, this device in your hand, which you can get any information that you want to get. But the types of questions and things that you really want to explore are in the area of life and experience. And I guess that leads me into, what we're dealing with and what we're seeing, and I see it in my own kids, and I employ quite a few young folks. I mean, 90% of the people that work for me, and I have over 100 employees, are under 30, or
Right.
in that young 30 range or younger. And the world that we live in today just perpetuates this idea of, this growth mindset that everything has to be up and to the right, and better than the day before, the week before, the year before. And that's just simply not true in terms of growth. It's growth is all isn't always up and to the right. Growth is happening underneath the surface. That's one of the reasons why I use this image behind me of this tree, because growth isn't just what's upward and outward, but it's the root structure that's down below, and this character and growth and depth of growth. And so I'd love for you to just share a story about your journey and where, looking back, and you've got, I'm sure you could share plenty of stories, but pick
Hmm.
one that is just was very instrumental in your life, and looking back and saying, wow, that was a really, really tough, difficult season in my life, and not really sure that I felt like I was growing at the time. I felt more like I was dying. And
Hmm.
but then looking back on that season, you could say, wow, I really, really grew a lot. Um, and but it felt like death. So what you got?
Yeah. Yeah. On a Enneagram, for those that know that tool, I'm a 7 backup 3. Sevens are full of life, enthusiastic, and all those things. On a disc, I'd be yellow, or well, it'd be an ID, DI, or colors, red, yellow, red. Anyway, what that means is I'm addicted to positivity, energy, things going up to the right.
Mhm.
Exactly, up to the right. And my biggest lessons have been learning that life can be monotonous, that there's seasons like with weather, climate, of cold, damp, dark, and it doesn't mean it's bad. Like I always equated that with bad. And so
Mm.
I would fight it and I would run from it. And so it'd be like every time I go to the gym, I wouldn't go hit the weights. And I'm wondering why I'm not getting any beefier. I'm not getting any stronger. I just walk around the gym and just give people high fives. Like, yeah, this is awesome. I go get a smoothie and leave. Like you got to hit the weights, man. You got to sweat. You got to go through the pain. More, no pain, no gain. So you're so right on. It's such a great image that you're giving as well. For me, there's a bunch of them. I think the biggest was marriage. And I married a very sweet, kind, capable, smart woman. And she was very patient. And I was kind of a tool or an a-hole. I'm forming up a book right now, A-Holes Anonymous. And maybe it'll become a book because I want to talk about this. I was clueless. Like there weren't enough people coming around me saying, bro, you're missing the mark, man.
Mm.
You got to get it together. So trial after trial after trial had to come in to the point where we're in counseling and it's ugly. And I'm there to fix her, bro. I mean, I'm so positive minded. I'm like, you need to get fixed. I look back now and it's embarrassing. Like the counselor probably was laughing inside. She takes about a month with my wife. And then she's like, so are we good? It's been a month and, this is better. This is better. And she says, I said, yeah, I think we're good. She said, tell me your story. I mean, we're going back 15, 20 years, right around the time we met. You could probably see all the same stuff too. But, uh, and I was like, my story? And I told her, I was like, yeah. She said, humor me. I started telling her about my childhood and this and that. She started crying. This strong, tough counselor woman who I respect immensely. Wow. Why would she be crying? And I
Mm.
think she was crying. She said later, she's like, you got all this stuff that you're not self-aware of. So I
Mm.
buried it, man. Divorced parents and tough upbringing and different things that happen in your youth. I just buried it because I'm a 7, man. Up to the right 100% of the time. But man, that rocket's going to go up at some point, run out of gas. And then what?
Yeah.
It crashes. And better to get self awareness when you're younger. Get mentors around you that give you honest feedback. Do a 360 feedback survey. Find a way to get clear on who you are so that you don't get to where I was at 40 something and I'm having to go recreate my marriage. And
Mm.
it's great today, but man, it was rough literally for 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
birthing that baby, so to speak.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if that's a a good story or not, but that's
No,
one.
I appreciate you sharing that. And, everybody on the surface, you want everybody to think everything's great, perfect. But, I mean, there's some things going on underneath the surface that, make life really difficult. And so, just being transparent and sharing that stuff and being able to allow people to speak into your life and, um, help you work through and process through, you mentioned counselor. Yeah, I've had a therapist now for, a couple years. And yeah, it's one of those
Yeah.
things which, I think I'll always have a therapist, because you can't see things, in yourself. And you need, it's like you need like a magic mirror to reflect it back. And a lot of times that's what a counselor or a therapist is for me. And for me, I usually go to a therapist or counselor for a very specific purpose. And then other things are surface out of that. And um so yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Well, let's do this. Let's kind of come to a close here. I want you to go back to that question that I asked you earlier, or I alluded to earlier, as we bring this thing to a close, as we think about our listeners out there, those that are young professionals and in their 20s, to early 30s. What
Yeah.
is it that you would say to your 25-year-old self, or your 35-year-old self, somewhere in that range? um, because there's people out there that are like there's sevens, and there's
Yeah.
um, and they're listening, they're like, wow,
Wonderful
this,
people.
yeah, yes, woos, for sure.
Yeah.
um, and so they're like, man, like, I resonate with this guy, but I'm living it right now. And so speak to yourself, tell your 25-year-old self, or what you want it to
Yeah.
hear. But in turn, they're gonna hear something that they need to hear, if they're like you. So
Yeah. On a sidebar, if I was going back to my 25-year-old self, invest in real estate. I mean, seriously, I thought about this morning. I said, if
yeah.
I could go back, the one thing I didn't do that I knew I should have done, but we were moving around and it never seemed to make sense. And I'll get to that one day, and then there's this point where you hit where you're like, it might be too late to buy something that's got a 30-year mortgage that we're going to rent back to someone and, get the money. Like, it needs to be done in your 20s, 30s at the latest, kind of thing. If you're going to, for most people, most situations, get the time-based return on money. Anyway, that's just a sidebar. And I'm serious about that. I would have bought three,
Yeah.
4, 5 homes or whatever and let, the renters that rent there end up paying off the mortgage. Boom. On a more leadership standpoint, it's really a lot of what we've been talking about. Okay, my style is up to the right. Well, what am I losing always looking up to the right? What's my blind spot? What's my kryptonite? Like, that's my superpower, being positive, being engaged, all those things. But what's the downside?
Mm.
Well, I'm not as detail oriented as I need to be. I'm not as consistent with everyday, day in and day out deliverables, routines. I don't like routines, but learn to embrace the things that you're not good at. So, do a personality tool, do a 360, get some feedback, ask some of your friends. One of my friends says, do it like this: buy somebody a meal and say, but I have a question for you, and you have to be completely honest. And then sit down and at the appropriate time say, hey, person I'm buying the meal for, what's it like sitting across the table from me?
That's so good.
And shut up. And probably ask it again and say, 100%, I want your feedback because I'm trying to get better. Explain the why. And they'll probably give you a couple nuggets and then end with, was that 100%? And they're going to go, well, Yeah, we're close. What else you got, man? Give me that last little nugget. The hardest part of the mountain is the last 10% to climb.
Yeah.
And that last 10% might be what they really need you to hear. And it might be difficult, but it could take your cancer away, if you want to put that analogy on there. So whatever you need to do to get that feedback, and it's painful, I know it, but what could it benefit you? There's been more books written on leadership. You and I are leadership freaks. And in the last 50 years, but Gallup says we're actually getting worse as leaders. There's got to be a disconnect there. And I think we're just learning all new techniques and tricks, but we're not really doing them. And then the millennials and centennials come along and they look at us or me and they go, why aren't you doing that stuff? So, man, I think we need to get into an era where we're interested, we're taking time for people, we care about them, care and command, not just one or the other. Because this generation doesn't want just all care either. Ping pong tables, beanbag chairs, and free snacks. Yeah, we all love that. But they want somebody to be real too and challenge them. Millennials and centennials are fantastic. We just don't understand them. And they don't understand us. But that's been every single generation that's come along. We don't understand the next generation. This is nothing new. So get out there and start understanding them. If you're in my season of life, if you're in the millennial centennial, under 40 segment, under 35 even, I'm rehashing what I said earlier. Be intentional, man. Ask us. We'd be honored. It's honoring that someone younger would say, hey, can we spend some time together? And I promise I'll do the same in return. That's my goal.
Good. So good. Well, brother, I greatly appreciate your time. It's been fun. We're about to hang up this call, this Zoom, and jump on your podcast. And I'm going to be in the hot seat here in a minute. So why don't you let's conclude with that. Tell folks how they can find you, and then how they can listen to, if they're interested, like literally go from this episode to find out what we recorded after this on your podcast. So tell us how they can find you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. You can find everything on me at myname.com. So andychristiansen.com. It's too long to spell. You have to look on the podcast. I'm sure you'll have it on there. But it's Andy Christian, S-E-N, if you're really actually trying to spell it. Christian, S-E-N.com, andychristiansen.com. So everything's on there. Book, Leadership by Design, podcast is called Tenacious. And it's going to be a good one with Captain Zach Thomas, I guarantee you. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, brother.
I'm on social media too, Instagram, Andy.Christiansen, Instagram, LinkedIn, awesome. You name it.
Well, thanks again. I love you, man. Appreciate you.
Ditto. Thank you.